Well, everyone, the clay Jurassic waters have gotten a lot more dangerous today because of Jurassic World Rebirth sea monsters now swimming your way, I do say. On this YouTube video today, I gotta say, today is a good day because I'm finishing my Jurassic World Rebirth Mosasaurus today. And while I sculpt away at this plasticine clay Mosasaurus today, we'll be discussing the symbiotic relationship, I say, between this lizard and the Spinosauridae today. In Jurassic World Rebirth, where creatures that once shook the earth thrive once again, some of the greatest threats might just dwell beneath the surface of the water. So today on Moose Motion Animation, I'm going to break down the return of the two most terrifying apex predators that coexist with each other in the franchise Jurassic World Rebirth, the Spinosaurus and the Mosasaurus, seen in ways they have never been seen in before. And today I'm going to investigate the real biology behind the most deadliest partnership we have ever seen in this franchise. There are several possibilities or reasons these two aquatic apex predators look different than the versions we saw in previous movies. Toy sales. So we know that the setting of Jurassic World Rebirth is located on the island of Sachi Bear, and it was the test bed of the genetic operations done back in the 1980s. Presumably InGen sequenced and manufactured the prehistoric DNA there, before shipping the completed genomes to Isla Sorna, to then be showcased off at Jurassic Park. So it is possible that some of these animals in this new movie are alpha bills, the prototypes that came later. These animals were either deemed too dangerous for the park, or just not proper looking for park attractment standards. So they were left behind on this island that we visit in Jurassic Park Rebirth. This includes the Spinosaurus and Mosasaurus that I will be going over today. An alternate scenario is that these are both relative newcomers who migrated to the islands after the events of Jurassic World Dominion, given the fact that the movie mentions that the current climate of the Earth can no longer contain these prehistoric beasts. Which, as a avid dinosaur nerd, I'm like, okay, well, that's not really plausible, but it's a movie, so okay. I guess we're just gonna ignore the fact that we had velociraptors in the snow and ice, and not to mention that there were actual dinosaurs in Antarctica. So, but I'm just a... Either way, this movie did imply that basically a lot of Earth's biomes were no longer suitable for these dinosaurs. So some species retreated to the equatorial belt, which just so happens to be where this newly introduced island would be. God, I am nerdy. But in either scenario, we are dealing with creatures from a different generational development from what we saw in 2001 and the 2010s. But let's start this analysis with the Spinosaurus, the object of admiration by its own fans and consternation by T.Rex fans since 2001. I wonder why. The Spinosaurus came stomping onto the screen and went from an obscure dinosaur, only seen in ensemble outings like Warpath, Jurassic Park, and a few toy lines, to become one of the title icons for the franchise, up until Jurassic World. But either way, the Rebirth's interpretation of the Spinosaurus is approximately 12 meters or 39 feet in length, or 4 meters tall or 13 feet tall at the hips, making it slightly smaller than the 2001 version from Jurassic Park 3. However, the return of this beast in the 7th movie reveals that the Supreme Hunter isn't alone, with 3 individuals in this pack of Spinosauridae, each one sporting a tanned color scheme with different dark stripe patterns on the sails of their backs, where their design is sporting a halfway point between the monstrous alligator baryonyx design we saw in the first Jurassic World Fallen Kingdom and a more modern-day understanding of what a real-life apex predator from Africa looked like, with a very wrinkled and crocodilian-like face over the distinctive kinked jaws of the real thing. These Spinosauruses do look a lot different than what we saw on Site B, sea, and then later Manticore Island. The more paleo-accurate Spinosaurus has a shorter but stockier body, with limbs that are more optimized for swimming. However, the JP3 Spino was pretty adapted to the water as is. But this new trio of Spinosaurus are able to keep up with aquatic predators. Other differences include a larger sailfish-like fin and a paddle-shaped tail to help with swimming and maneuverability in the water. More pronounced talons on the thumbs, and the big crests on top of the eyes being swapped out for one smaller one in the middle of the head. One thing you will likely notice in these animals is the shortening of the hind legs, which is more like the paleo-accurate Spino. These hind legs were relatively short, but thicker than you think. This not only did provide the Spinosaurus with more mass, but also lowers their center of gravity, which means this Spinosaurus will likely have better balance on land. But even then, the tendency for these sailbacks to not like humans is certainly still very strong, with this trio showing the same tendencies going after boats like their distant cousin did. The reason why they do this will be discussed later when we start talking about their accomplice, which just so happens to be the creature I am currently making, the Mosasaurus. The Jurassic World Rebirth Mosasaurus is around 200 feet long or 61 meters. This is larger than the Mosasaurus seen in the original Jurassic World trilogy, but smaller than the version we saw in Fallen Kingdom and Dominion. Quick fun fact, these giant marine reptiles were first intended to show up in an early version of Jurassic Park 3. So to be honest, it's quite fitting that this brand new incarnation accompanies the return of that film's star. Only now is this partnership far more literal. The new Mosasaurus, apart from the size and accuracy, similar to what was seen in the prior trilogies, features another paleo-accuracy overhaul like the Spinosaurus. However, quite a few differences between the scientifically accurate one and the movie do still exist, such as the lack of a forked tongue, and with the tail fin being slightly smaller than what the real thing likely had. However, it should be mentioned this is far more accurate compared to the Indominus Slayer, sporting a more stream-like body and losing a lot of the crocodile influence. And this new Mosasaurus has a different color scheme, with a far greater degree of counter shading. This is the same color palette seen on submarines, mammals, and many sharks, where the upper half of the body is a darker color to help blend in with the depths below, while the underbelly is lighter to help blend in with the light from the surface. These changes, along with larger tail flukes, allow this Mosasaurus to swim through the water with far less resistance, and would make a lot less noise than its counterpart from Isla Nublar. So that being said, this sea-going colossus might just be one of the most powerful carnivores yet we've seen in this franchise. This Mosasaurus also has a very different temperament from the one we see in Jurassic World, being simultaneously just as aggressive towards humans, but is also very curiously cooperative with another apex predator. Another big reveal in this movie, which is arguably on par with the T.Rex, which I have gone over in prior videos, the beasts from Rebirth have subverted an all too common trope of when a theropod gets near a large body of water. But instead of attacking the dinosaur, the giant sea monster actually works with them. This might initially seem like a fantastic addition, almost on par with frill-spitting Dilophosaurus or giant scaly raptors that don't have feathers. But believe it or not, there are aspects of nature today that do resemble this kind of partnership. Being an apex predator isn't always easy, and technically a fight avoided is a fight survived. With the Spinosaurus in this new film being a lot more maneuverable and agile, in the water, attacking one of them might be a lot more trouble than it's really worth. The Mosasaurus could certainly kill one of the theropods if they battled it out, but why bother getting a meal that could wind up being nimble enough to start biting back, especially when there is an abundance of easier and larger prey out there. And partnerships between large apex predators and comparatively smaller carnivores happen to this very day. Perhaps one of the most fascinating examples involving a modern-day dinosaur is the relationship between wolves and ravens. These birds have been observed doing some odd behaviors, basically cooperating and bonding with wolves. Note this is a relationship between a predator and a scavenger. The scavenging birds feed off the canine's kills, hang around each other, and the birds will even play with the pack members and the puppies. Meanwhile, the wolves get little eyes in the sky and know to follow the ravens for where the food may be it alive or dead, and use the birds as early warning systems for threats of rival packs and perhaps other predators. And when a wolf pup grows up and goes out on its own, the raven that grew up playing with it will follow the lone wolf. The symbiotic relationship between these two species will give them an edge no other lone animal would have. Basically, the idea here just happens to be, well, the Spinosaurus is essentially the raven, whereas the wolf is the Mosasaurus. Another fun example of this symbiosis happens between a 100-pound Nile crocodile and the unexpected dinosaur ally of their own. The dick-up bird may look unassuming, but it has a scrappy enough temper to square up with threats many times its size. And well, if it needs backup, crocodiles will respond to the bird's alarm calls and accordingly make their own entrance. But the big question here is, what does the crocodile exactly get from this? Not only is the bird much more active and have better eyesight, but it can respond to threats much quicker. This is especially helpful when a mother croc is making a nest, which she even allows the dick-ups to lay their eggs next to, for more mutual protection. So that brings us back to the dinosaurs. So what does the Spinosaurus and Mosasaurus do to help each other out? The Spinosauruses are big, powerful apex predators in their own right, but they aren't as massive or as built to handle the ocean nearly as well as the giant lizard. Having a Mosasaurus to call on for backup could help out a lot in bringing down huge marine game such as whales, as well as fending off incursions by one of the most dangerous apex predators in the modern Jurassic World, one that both carnivores might be smart enough to consider them a threat due to their big noisy presence, and that happens to be, well, humans. And given the previous Spinosaurus' tendency to already gun for boats, any help counts. I'm sure a lot of you, even the trailer emphasizes, nobody's dumb enough to go where we are going. And well, this pack might just be the answer as to why very few boats actually ever survive making it to the island. Mainly because the Mosasaurus could be using the Spinosaurus as an extra pair of sensors and eyes. This new Mosasaurus does have a lot of benefits, but still lacks a forked tongue like its ancient ancestor, which means it could potentially have a reduced capacity to field its Jacobson organ. Modern adaptations with the forked tongue seen in monitor lizards and snakes helps the animal pinpoint the direction and distance of a target. And if the Mosa is also aggressive towards humans, having a trio of Spinosaurus with acute vision could definitely help point it in the right direction. Having agile and amphibious Spinos might also help drive potential targets further into deeper waters, such as herding land-bound dinosaurs into the water where certain death from the Mosasaurus awaits. Mosasaurs attacking land animals was a method of hunting that the Mosasaurus may have resorted to locked inside its lagoon between the events of 2015 and 2018. So it isn't too hard to imagine this Mosa using the same methodology here, essentially using the Spinos as aids. The ways these two animals may have met and began to cooperate could be one of many reasons. The simplest route for these four to get along would have been an encounter at a younger age, whether or not they shared the same territory upon release into the wild, or perhaps hatched together, essentially growing up together and looking after each other as a pack as they grew to maturity. The other more difficult method to get along would require both of these in-universe reptiles to be extremely intelligent, and perhaps more so even than their real-life counterparts, where a mutual relationship basically is formed because a conflict between the two predators isn't worth it, whilst helping each other over from a distance with leftover kills would slowly build trust amongst each other. After one day, after a long time tolerance turns into an alliance. There is another element though that is often overlooked that may explain another reason these two cooperate so well. Remember Dr. Henry Loomis's comment about the Spinos protecting the territories, stalking and hunting rivals. This somewhat implies a sophisticated method of communication between the two species. Either these exceptionally smart animals learn to understand each other's different calls and what they mean, or whoever cooked up these animals in the genetics lab used a common gene contributor when creating these prehistoric creatures. Similar to how it's speculated, the InGen's Mosasaurus was part whale, given that it was seen being a little bit too friendly with a pair of whales at the end of Jurassic World Dominion, which is honestly not too far-fetched for the cinematic universe, that these two animals could share a common set of genes, further bolstering their collaboration behavior. The best example of this was how the Indominus Rex was able to communicate with the raptors in Jurassic World, and were perhaps the most dangerous pack in the previous trilogy. Knowing this, we can expect the Spino pack and the Mosasaurus to work together, and perhaps someday we'll see some complex hunting behaviors between these two creatures, just like modern-day crocodiles. And submutations, bringing forth the most dangerous and powerful symbiotic relationship in this franchise thus far. But that concludes all the fun facts today on the Mosasaurus and the Spinosauridae, I do say. So hopefully you enjoyed part 3 today on this marine lizard, I say, and if you did, be sure to smash that like button as hard as a dinosaur today. Comment below what you think of the project, share with your friends, and perhaps consider subscribing if you're new, because there's a lot more dinosaur content coming for you. Because now that our Mosasaurus is done, a giga-sized project that'll be a lot of fun will soon be underway, I do say. But in the meantime, be sure to stay out of the water, you might say. And I just want to thank you all for watching this video today. Thanks for sticking around to the very end of the video. Be sure to leave a like if you enjoyed the content, comment below what you think, share with your friends, and perhaps consider subscribing if you're new. And anyway, that's it from me. Till next time, take it easy.